this is very important. One thing is this notion of human nature as a fixed phenomenon, right? So that human beings, this is how the Greco-Roman view of history was. It's cyclical. There's no change in history. Just the wheel of fortune goes round and round and round. Sometimes you go rich, sometimes you're poor. But humans are always the same. And that becomes a very important way of thinking about history that allows Western historians to go back and say, I know what happened in the past because people in the past were just like people now. If people now are greedy bastards who always just want whatever they want and trying to, maximize their gain and all this stuff like that, and they're cynical and nasty, that's what people were in the past. That's very different from the way that Christians thought about the time of Jesus, or Muslims think about the companions or the Prophet. We don't think about the companions as like other people. So then the other thing to discover, as I said before, is the notion of the historian as the detached analyst. So someone like Tacitus, who's a historian, it dies around 130 of the Common Era, or Polybius, as I mentioned earlier. Polybius says that the job of the historian is he has to be ready to criticize his friends and praise his enemies. So you kind of, the historian as the detached analyst. So this stuff is all discovered. A couple of things come out of the Greco-Roman tradition. One, the idea that you go back and you discover these texts and you start to realize how much language has changed and how much texts have been doctored. Two, notion of historical distance, how we're really just different from the past. Okay. Three, the idea that there's a fixed human nature doesn't change over time. And four, the notion of a historian writing as a kind of detached and sort of, I don't want to say supercilious, but almost kind of haughty. The historian is writing about, like, you know how people, if you go into a history section of a bookstore and you pick up a book, it doesn't just talk about the past in a matter-of-fact way. It's always making these kind of quips and jokes and things like that. And this guy was so silly, he did this. So there's almost a supercilious attitude towards the past.
What you're saying that happened in Europe seems to be, it's almost like a divorced, the children of a divorce, right? Where this massive break happens and everyone remembers that year as the year of the divorce. Everything is now judged now from 2 years from the divorce, 3 years from the divorce. Everything's judged by that. And then whoever the villain is of the divorce, usually, according to one report that I read, is that usually a kid will assign one of the parents as the villain and one as the victim, right? Usually, like younger kids will make it black and white, that there's one villain, there's one victim. Then the villain, everything about the villain becomes mistrusted if they see it in someone else. So let's say someone villainizes the mom, let's say, right? They say the mom was so bad, ruined my dad. Now he has everything about his mom. Let's say if she was into like beauty and she was into whatever.
Pilates.
Yeah, all those things, right? They actually start to mistrust anyone who has those qualities, right? So what you're saying is actually seems like but this is at the civilizational level.
So that really starts you see this very clearly in the 1700s. Someone like Voltaire died in 1778. This guy's hatred for the Catholic Church was just like, epic. I mean, it made him
mad funny though.
I mean, he would just like he would praise Islam and praise Jews, groups he didn't like Jews at all, for example. But he would praise whoever if it helped him make the Catholic Church look bad, right? So he was just for example, a lot of his anti-slavery discussions are not because he thought slavery was wrong inherently. It's because the Catholic Church was supporting it. So that's definitely true. And you see, I mean, there's like a lot of anti-clericalism in the emergence of a modern view of the world.
No, you know how we have the hadith that you're going to copy the people who preceded you, and you're going to copy them, even if they go down a lizard hole, meaning the smallest detail, right? Now, what about the most massive things, which are your way of thinking, your way of viewing the world, your way of viewing your imams, your way of viewing your past, right? So we are now, and you're noticing this in academia, we now have a lot of Muslims who actually their minds have adopted this framework of mistrust of the past. Like, we're in a modern time, so we have an identity crisis, like we're not connected to the past, right? They were just guys, just like we're guys, hungry to succeed, whatever, right? And so they've taken this on, and it's now is in the Arab world too. Right? It's not just in the West. It's in the Arab world too. Egyptians have this, right? You see writers who have this, who now view the Prophet's generation, alayhi salatu wasalam, and the Sahaba and the next two and the next three, first three generations. In the same way that you have now the Renaissance and Reformation and Protestant Reformation and all these guys viewing and trying to tear down, like we need to tear it down, right?
Yeah.
That idea, you see this now in Muslim intellectuals.
There's a book that came out in 1958 called Adwa ala Sunnah al-Muhammadiyya by Muhammad Abu Raya, died around 1970. And he was a student of Rashid Rida. And that book is like the most comprehensive and aggressive attack on the Hadith tradition. It's not irreverent. It's basically, you can imagine kind of a neo-Mu'tazilite. But the point is, his criticisms are very much the type of criticism of a Western historian. You know, he says the companions are like any other people. Right? You know, they were selfish and and you know, self-involved and wanted to advance their own interests and unreliable. But by the way, another thing I forgot to mention is another element of the Greco-Roman heritage that is revived. There's two things. One is skepticism, literally a philosophy called skepticism, which is they got from a scholar named Sextus Empiricus, who died around 200 AD. And a lot of the idea that human beings cannot, so skeptics were, they believed that right and wrong, absolute truth was just simply unknowable. It was unknowable. In fact, even sense perception was not really reliable. And they used the example of a stick, you know, when you put it in the water and you look at the stick, it appears to bend, which of course it's not really bent. So how can we really even trust sense perception? So what they said is, look, right and wrong can't really know about. So basically just behave according to the custom of the city you live in. That's right and wrong. And that has a big impact on Western Europe after the 1500s, because this idea of, you know, let's not talk about God anymore. Let's not talk about metaphysics anymore. Let's not talk about reality. Let's just study the world around us. What's going to